Level 1. You are 24 years old. You have nothing, no savings, no cushion, and the government is more present in your daily life right now than it will ever be again. It's a Tuesday morning, and you are sitting in a fluorescent waiting room with a number in your hand, here to prove, once again, that you are poor enough to deserve help. You have filled out the forms and brought the documents, the pay stubs, the bank statements, the proof of address, because at this level the government does not simply help you, it verifies you, repeatedly, as though the help were a privilege you might be stealing. There are limits on what you are allowed to own and still qualify. There is a letter, the first of many, and the letter says, in effect, prove that you still deserve this. And you will spend a great deal of your time, at this level, proving exactly that. This is the great irony almost no one expects. That the government is most intrusive, most controlling, and most watchful at the very bottom, where people have the least. When you are poor, you interact with the most coercive parts of the state constantly: the benefits office, the eligibility review, the housing authority, the court that charges fees you cannot pay, the fine that doubles when you are late. The government watches what you own, what you earn, where you live, and it can withdraw what little it gives the moment you fail to satisfy the paperwork. You are, in the eyes of the system, not quite a citizen to be served, but a risk to be managed. A person whose poverty has made you a problem the state has decided to keep an eye on. This is the first thing nobody tells you about how the government treats you. The first thing is that at the bottom, the government is everywhere in your life, and almost none of it is on your side. The poor are the most surveilled and the most conditional of all citizens, required to continually prove their worthiness for help that is given grudgingly and revoked easily, while the most coercive arms of the state, the fines, the fees, the courts, fall on them hardest. You experience more government than you ever will at any higher level. And you experience it not as a partner, but as a supervisor, one who assumes the worst and reminds you constantly that what you receive on conditions you do not control. You hand in your forms. Someone will review them. You will come back next month and do it again, because at this level, your relationship with the government is a job in itself. And the pay is the right to keep barely getting by. The verb at level 1 is monitor. The government monitors you, watches you, manages you. Monitoring at this level means being treated as a risk rather than a citizen, and learning the great irony of the whole system, which is that the government is most present in your life precisely when you have the least. Level 2. You are 30. You have a real job and a real income, around $100,000 a year. And you have discovered that you have become, in the eyes of the government, something very specific, which is a source of revenue. It's an ordinary payday, and you are looking at the gap between what you earned and what actually arrived. The portion that was taken before you ever touched it, withheld at the source, automatic, unavoidable. At this level, the government's posture toward you has changed completely. It no longer monitors you the way it monitored you at the bottom, because you are no longer a risk. You are an asset. Your income is wages, which means it is fully visible, reported automatically, and taxed before it reaches your hands, and there is almost nothing you can do about any of it. You are the most straightforward taxpayer there is, the kind whose money the government can count on, because it takes its share before you even have the chance to spend it, hide it, or move it. You have entered the most squeezed position in the entire system, and almost no one warns you about it. You make too much to receive anything, and not enough to afford the tools that would lower what you owe. You cannot defer your wages, turn them into capital gains, or route them through a trust. You earn, the government takes its portion immediately, and your effective rate, the real percentage of your money that goes to the state, is often higher than that of people with many times your wealth, because they have options you never will. The government does not watch you the way it did when you were poor. It does not need to. It already has your money. This is the second thing nobody tells you about how the government treats you. The second thing is that the middle is where the government does the least watching and the most taking. Because the wage earner is the most reliable revenue in the system, fully visible and impossible to shelter. You are not surveilled like the poor or courted like the rich. You are simply harvested automatically. Your rate quietly higher than that of people far wealthier than you, and your reward is to be left mostly alone, which after the scrutiny of the bottom can almost feel like freedom, until you realize it is just the calm of something the system has already finished milking. You are the workhorse. You pay for much of it, and you have the least ability of anyone to change your terms. You put the pay stub away. The amount that left was larger than you would like, and it will be the same next time, because at this level you do not negotiate with the government. You simply pay it, and it counts on you to keep doing so. The verb at level 2 is tax. The government taxes you, plainly and efficiently, because you cannot escape it. Taxing at this level means being treated as reliable revenue rather than a person, and learning that the captive wage earner often pays a higher real rate than the rich, for the simple reason that wages cannot hide. Level 3. You are 37. You have crossed $1 million, most of it from building something of your own. And for the first time, the government has begun to treat you not as something to tax, but as something to encourage. It's a meeting with an accountant. The first real one you have ever had, and you are learning a language that was invisible to you your whole working life. The language of the people who do not simply pay. Deductions. Depreciation. The favorable treatment of investment, of real estate, of income that comes from owning rather than working. At this level, you discover that the tax code is not only a set of demands. It is also a set of invitations, a long list of things the government will reward you for doing, almost all of them aimed at people who have capital to deploy, which, for the first time in your life, is you. The wage earner you used to be could not touch any of this. The owner you have become is exactly who it was written for. You have entered the level where the system begins, quietly, to bend in your favor. The government wants certain things to happen: investment, building, the deployment of capital. And it has filled the tax code with incentives to make them happen. Incentives useless to someone earning a wage and enormously valuable to someone with money to put to work. You start to pay a lower real rate than you did when you made far less, not by cheating, but by accepting the invitations the code extends to people like you. And you begin to understand that the rules were never the same for everyone, that they reward capital and burden labor, and that you have just crossed from one side of that line to the other. This is the third thing nobody tells you about how the government treats you. The third thing is that once you own rather than earn, the government stops only taking from you and starts incentivizing you, offering a tax code full of rewards available almost exclusively to people with capital. The more money you have to deploy, the more the rules tilt toward you, lowering your real rate through entirely legal doors the wage earner never even sees. This is the level where you first feel the system working for you instead of on you, where the letter from the government changes from a demand into something closer to an offer, and where you realize that the difference between burden and benefit was never about how hard you worked. It was about whether your money came from labor or from ownership. You leave the meeting with a plan. You will owe less next year than the math of your income suggests, legally. And you will have done it simply by becoming, at last, the kind of person the code was designed to favor. The verb at level 3 is incentivize. The government incentivizes you, rewarding you for owning, building, and deploying capital. Incentivizing at this level means crossing from the side of the code that burdens labor to the side that rewards ownership, and discovering that the rules were never the same for the worker and the owner. Level 4. You are 44. You are worth $10 million, and the government has begun, in ways both financial and political, to court you. It's an evening at a fundraiser, and you are in a room you would never have been invited to a decade ago, because at this level you have something the powerful want, which is money that can be given, and influence that can be lent. A person who makes laws shakes your hand and remembers your name. At this level, your relationship to the government becomes, for the first time, a two-way street. You are no longer only subject to it. You are courted by it, because your wealth has made you useful, as a donor, as an employer, as a person whose decisions about where to put your capital affect things that politicians care about. The treatment you receive has shifted from extraction to invitation, from a state that takes to a state that asks. You have entered the level where money begins to buy not just tax advantages, but access. The ability to be heard by the people who write the rules that govern your money. Your income now comes largely from capital, taxed at lower rates than the wages you used to earn. And your money, increasingly, has a voice in campaigns, in causes, in the quiet conversations where policy is shaped before it is ever written down. The government that monitored you when you were poor and harvested you when you were middle class now wants something from you, and that changes everything. Because a state that wants your favor treats you very differently from a state that simply takes your money. This is the fourth thing nobody tells you about how the government treats you. The fourth thing is that at a certain level of wealth, the relationship reverses and the government begins to court you, seeking your money and your favor rather than simply taking your share. Your capital is now mobile and your decisions consequential, and so the people who hold power begin to treat you as someone to be persuaded rather than commanded. This is the level where wealth quietly converts into political voice, where the letter from the government is one you could answer with a phone call to someone who already knows your name, and where the uncomfortable truth becomes visible, which is that money does not just buy goods and services. Past a certain point, it buys a hearing with the people who make the rules. You leave the fundraiser. Your name is now known to people it pays to be known by, and the relationship between you and the state has become, for the first time, a conversation between something like equals. The verb at level 4 is court. The government courts you, seeking your money and your favor. Courting at this level means crossing from a citizen who is governed to a donor who is consulted, and learning that beyond a certain wealth, money begins to purchase the one thing the middle class never gets, which is a voice in the rules. Level 5. You are 51. You are worth $100 million, and the government no longer merely courts you, it accommodates you. It's a quiet day, and your wealth now sits almost entirely in assets that grow without ever being taxed, because you never have to sell them. You borrow against them when you need money, at interest lower than any tax you would pay, and you live, comfortably, on debt secured by a fortune the government cannot touch until you choose to let it, which you never do. This is the strategy the very wealthy use and the wage earner has never heard of, and it means your real tax rate, measured against your actual wealth, can fall to a number the middle class would find insulting. The government accommodates this. The rules permit it. And the people who could change those rules are, in many cases, the same people whose campaigns you and those like you help to fund. You have entered the level where you are no longer simply governed by the system. You are, in a small but real way, one of the hands that shapes it. Your foundations influence policy. Your donations shape who holds office. Your lawyers and your peers help write the very provisions that govern fortunes like yours. The government treats your preferences as inputs. Your money is something to be attracted and kept rather than seized. Because it has understood that capital like yours is mobile, that it can leave, and that a wise state accommodates the wealthy rather than driving them away. You are courted, yes, but more than that. You are now accommodated, your interests quietly built into the rules themselves. This is the fifth thing nobody tells you about how the government treats you. The fifth thing is that at the highest levels, the government stops governing you and starts accommodating you, treating your wealth as something to attract rather than tax. The state competes for your favor, lowering the effective weight it places on you precisely because you are powerful enough to take your capital elsewhere. The wage earner, who cannot move and cannot hide, is taxed without mercy. You, who can do both, are accommodated with care. And the gap between those two treatments, the milked worker and the courted fortune, is not an accident. It is the system functioning exactly as power always has, flowing toward those with the leverage to bend it. You review your affairs. You will pay, this year, a smaller share of your wealth than your assistant will pay of her salary, and every part of it will be perfectly legal. Because at this level the law is no longer only something that happens to you. It is something that happens, increasingly, for you. The verb at level 5 is accommodate. The government accommodates you, shaping itself around your wealth rather than simply taxing it. Accommodating at this level means having your preferences built into the rules, and learning that the state competes for the favor of those who can take their money elsewhere, while it harvests, without mercy, those who cannot. Level 6. You are 58. You are worth $1 billion, and governments, plural, now defer to you. It's a morning, and on your desk are proposals, not demands, from places that want what you have. A region offering you enormous incentives to build there. A government offering favorable treatment if you will base your operations within its borders. A city competing, openly, against other cities to win your investment with tax breaks and concessions and promises. At this level, the relationship has inverted almost completely from where it began. The poor are summoned by the state. You are courted by states, multiple ones, each understanding that your capital is global, that it can go anywhere, and that attracting it is worth bending considerable rules to achieve. You do not ask the government for permission at this level so much as governments ask you for your presence. You have entered the level where wealth becomes something like sovereignty, where you operate not beneath governments, but alongside them. Your decisions about where to put your money can lift a town or pass it over, and so towns, regions, even nations compete to earn those decisions. Your foundations operate at the scale of public policy, shaping the lives of millions in education, in health, in science, areas once thought to be the work of governments alone. You move capital across borders with a keystroke, beyond the easy reach of any single state, and that mobility is itself a kind of power, because a government cannot tax or command. What can simply leave? The state, faced with wealth like yours, does not dictate. It deals. This is the sixth thing nobody tells you about how the government treats you. The sixth thing is that at the scale of $1 billion, governments stop commanding you and start competing for you, offering incentives and concessions to win capital that can go anywhere on Earth. You have become mobile in a way ordinary citizens and ordinary businesses never are, and that mobility inverts the entire relationship because power over you depends on your inability to leave. And you can always leave. So the state courts you with subsidies, defers to you on policy, and treats you less like a subject to be governed than like a sovereign to be negotiated with. The letter from the government, at this level, is an invitation written in the language of incentives, and you are entirely free to decline it. You consider the proposals. You will choose whichever serves you best, and several governments will treat your choice as a victory or a loss, because at this level you have become something a state must persuade, and can no longer simply rule. The verb at level 6 is defer. Governments defer to you, competing for capital that can go anywhere. Deferring at this level means being courted by states rather than governed by them, and learning that mobility is power, because no one can command what is free to leave. Level 7. You are 65. You are worth $10 billion. You operate across the entire world as a power among powers. And you have finally understood the single rule that governed your treatment at every level you ever passed through. It's a quiet evening, and you deal with governments now as something close to an equal. Heads of state take your meetings. Your wealth exceeds the budgets of entire nations. Your capital lives everywhere and nowhere, beyond the command of any single authority on earth. You are not above the law exactly, but you exist in a space where the law is something to be negotiated rather than simply obeyed, and where the state, rather than ruling you, must reckon with you. And sitting here, at the top, you can finally see the whole ladder, and the one principle that explained every rung of it. And here it is. The thing the entire climb was teaching you. The government never treated you according to what you needed, and it never treated you according to what you deserved. It treated you, at every single level, according to one thing only, which was your leverage, your power to walk away, to move, to hide, to fund, to refuse. When you had nothing, you had no leverage. And so you were monitored and made to prove yourself. When you earned a wage, you had no leverage, because your money could not move or hide, and so you were taxed without mercy. And as your wealth grew, your leverage grew with it, until at the top you held so much that the most powerful governments on earth treated you as a peer. The whole time, the state was responding not to your humanity but to your leverage, and wealth, you finally understand, was never just money. It was stored leverage. The accumulated power to make the government negotiate rather than command. This is the seventh thing nobody tells you about how the government treats you. The seventh thing is that the government treats you according to your leverage and almost nothing else, and money is simply the most reliable form leverage takes. This is why the poor, who have no leverage, are watched and managed, why the middle, whose income cannot move, is taxed without relief, and why the rich, whose capital can go anywhere, are courted and accommodated and deferred to. It is not, at bottom, about virtue, and it is not about need. It is about power, and at every level of wealth. The state extends you roughly as much freedom as your leverage compels it to, and not a great deal more. You did not buy the government's better treatment with money. You bought it with the leverage that money is, and the person at the bottom and the person at the top were governed by the same law all along, which is that power answers. In the end, mostly to power. The verb at level 7 is negotiate. You negotiate with the government as a peer, having accumulated enough leverage that it can no longer simply command you. Negotiating at this level means reaching the place the whole system was always pointing toward and understanding, at last, that every level of treatment you ever received was a measure not of your worth, but of your leverage. So let's pull this together. At level 1, the government monitors you, watching and managing a citizen with no leverage at all. At level 2, it taxes you, harvesting the wage earner who is fully visible and cannot hide. At level 3, it incentivizes you, filling the code with rewards built for people with capital. At level 4, it courts you, because your money has quietly become a voice. At level 5, it accommodates you, building your preferences into the rules so your capital does not leave. At level 6, it defers to you, competing for what it can no longer command. At level 7, it negotiates with you, because your leverage has grown larger than its power to compel you. Here is the thing nobody on YouTube will tell you about how the government treats you. The government does not treat you according to how much you need, and it does not treat you according to how much you deserve. It treats you according to how much leverage you have, and wealth is simply the most dependable form that leverage takes. This single principle explains the entire ladder in one stroke. The poor are managed because they cannot leave. The middle is taxed because its money cannot move. The rich are accommodated because their capital can go anywhere, and a state can only command what cannot escape. Every level of treatment is a measure of leverage, and money, in the end, is leverage you can store. Now, there are two ways to see this, and honest people hold both. Defenders of the system will tell you that this is not corruption, but reality. That capital genuinely is mobile and must be attracted or it will leave and take its jobs with it. That oversight of benefits does prevent fraud. That the wealthy already pay the largest share of the income tax collected, and that a country which does not accommodate its job creators will simply lose them to one that does. Critics will tell you that this is exactly the problem, that a system in which the office worker pays a higher real rate than the billionaire has lost any honest claim to fairness. That the heavy policing of the poor and the gentle courting of the rich is a moral failure dressed up as economic necessity, and that leverage deciding everything is what justice is supposed to prevent. Both are describing the same machine. What is not in dispute, by anyone who looks closely, is the pattern itself. So whatever you conclude about whether it is right, understand how it works. If you are near the bottom, know that the weight you feel is real, and that it is the weight the system places on those without leverage, not a verdict on your worth. And if you are climbing, understand what you are actually accumulating, which is not only money but leverage, the slow power to change your terms with the state. The number in your account was never only a number. It was always a measure of how much the government has to negotiate with you, instead of simply telling you what to do. Somewhere right now, a 24-year-old with nothing is sitting in a fluorescent waiting room, holding a number, filling out forms to prove they deserve a little help. Watched and managed by a government that is more present in their life than it will ever be again, and assuming, as most people do, that the higher they climb, the more the state will come for them. They do not yet know that the opposite is closer to the truth, that the government is heaviest at the bottom and lightest at the top, and that the whole arrangement runs on a single principle, which is leverage. They think wealth will bring more government. It mostly brings less. They think the rules are the same for everyone. They are not. And the difference, at every level, is not how much you need or deserve, but how much power you have to walk away. The ladder has 7 levels. At the bottom, the government commands you. At the top, it negotiates with you. And everything in between is the slow conversion of money into leverage. The gradual purchase of the right to be asked rather than told. If this video changed how you think about the government and your money, hit subscribe. We have more videos like this on the channel, each one pulling apart a piece of how wealth and power actually work, underneath the story we are usually told. See you in the next one.